Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. If I can't live as a girl, then at least, could you let me be called by my name just once? The words hung on the cheap lined paper, a ghostly plea under the weak yellow glow of my desk lamp. Outside, a fine and powdery snow was settling over the silent street, dusting the rooftops and hedges in a blanket of pristine white. It was December 22nd, 2 nights before the world would erupt in forced cheer, and my own world felt like it was shrinking down to the 4 walls of this room. I was 19, and I felt like I hadn't taken a proper breath in my entire life. I sat hunched over my desk, the fleece of my overheated gray hoodie pulled up over my head, a pathetic attempt to hide from myself. It was my uniform, this shapeless garment. It was a buffer between my body and the world, a canvas of gray that promised nothing and revealed less. My body, I didn't hate it. That was the strange part. It was a perfectly functional, healthy male body. It did everything I asked of it, but it wasn't mine. Looking in the mirror was like seeing a stranger who happened to be living in my house, using my toothbrush. He was fine, I guess, but I didn't know him, and I certainly didn't love him. The same went for my name, Alex. It was a good name, a strong name, but every time someone said it, a little pinprick of wrongness jabbed at my soul. Alex, can you take out the trash? Good job on the midterm. Alex, hey, Alex, you coming? Each utterance felt like being zipped into a suit that was 2 sizes too small, the fabric straining at the seams, the collar choking me just a little. Tonight, the feeling was unbearable. The quiet of the house, the gentle hiss of the radiator, the silent fall of snow, it all amplified the screaming void inside me. So, I had done something childish, something absurd. I decided to write a letter to Santa Claus. It felt ridiculous. A 19-year-old man, legally an adult, writing to a fairy tale. But who else could I tell my parents loved me, but they loved Alex. They loved the son they thought they had. My friends knew Alex, the quiet, agreeable guy who was good with computers and never caused any trouble. How could I explain to them that Alex was a ghost, a role I was playing, and that the real me was trapped underneath, suffocating? The letter wasn't a list of wants. I didn't ask for a new body, for a miracle to wake up different. I knew better than to ask for the impossible. The request was smaller, more pathetic, and somehow more honest. I just wanted the name, a girl's name, a name I'd whisper to myself in the dark when the loneliness was too much to bear, a name that felt like coming home. Dear Santa, I had written, my hand trembling slightly. I know I'm too old for this, but I don't know who else to ask. Everyone calls me Alex, but it doesn't feel right. It never has. There's a name that feels right. It feels like me. If I can't live as a girl, then at least, could you let me be called by my name just once, just for Christmas? The name is Alexia. My finger traced the letters Alexia. Alexia. It felt like warmth spreading through my chest, a fragile, beautiful thing. Just writing it down, admitting it on paper was both terrifying and liberating. It was the first time I had ever given my secret a physical form. It was no longer just a thought, a fleeting, shameful wish. It was real. It was ink on a page. I folded the letter carefully, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't going to mail it. Of course. That was insane. It was just an exercise, a way to get the poison out. I would hide it, or maybe even burn it in the morning, a small ceremony to acknowledge and then bury my deepest desire. I stood up and walked to the window, pushing aside the curtain to look out at the snow. The street was empty, lit by the warm, orange glow of the streetlights. Our neighbor's house, Mrs. Evans's house, was dark except for the gentle, multicolored twinkling of the Christmas lights she'd meticulously strung along her porch railing. She was a nice lady, a widow. She always smiled and waved when she saw me, but we'd never had a real conversation. I opened the window just a crack, letting in a sliver of the cold, crisp air. It smelled like winter, clean and sharp. The folded letter was still in my hand, a small, warm square of paper against my cold skin. As I stood there, lost in thought, a sudden, rogue gust of wind funneled between our houses. It startled me, whipping into my room with a sudden forceful whoosh. The letter was snatched from my grasp. I gasped, Lunging for it, my fingers brushing against the edge of the paper but failing to catch it, I watched, frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated horror. As the small white rectangle fluttered in the wind, it danced for a moment, a tiny white ghost against the dark night sky, before it sailed over the low wooden fence that separated our properties and drifted down, 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 disappearing into the darkness of Mrs. Evans's snow-covered front yard. My blood ran cold. I slammed the window shut, my breath fogging the glass, my heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. She would find it. In the morning, she'd go out to get her newspaper or her mail, and she'd see a folded piece of paper lying in the snow. She'd pick it up. She'd read it. She would know. My secret, the one I had guarded with every fiber of my being for my entire life, was now lying in a stranger's yard, waiting to be discovered. Shame, hot and sickening, washed over me. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. The name that had brought me a moment of comfort now felt like a brand, a confession that would ruin everything. My quiet life, the fragile peace I'd maintained by being invisible, it was all about to be blown apart by a single, stupid gust of wind. I stumbled back to my bed and fell onto it, burying my face in my pillow, my mind screaming, "What have I done?" The next morning, I woke up with a feeling of pure dread. It was a physical weight in my stomach, a cold, heavy stone. I had slept in fits and starts, haunted by nightmares of Mrs. Evans reading my letter aloud on the street, of my parents' confused and hurt faces, of whispers and pointing fingers. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house wake up. I could hear my dad in the kitchen, the clink of his coffee mug, the low murmur of the morning news on the radio. It all sounded impossibly normal, a soundtrack from a life that was no longer mine. I forced myself to go to the window. Peeking through a crack in the blinds, I scanned Mrs. Evans's yard. The snow was a smooth, undisturbed blanket. The letter was gone. My stomach twisted into a tighter knot. So it had happened. She had found it. The waiting was the worst part. Every creak of the floorboards, every car that passed on the street, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I imagined the phone ringing, or worse, the doorbell. I rehearsed 1,000 frantic denials in my head. It was a joke, a prank. It wasn't my handwriting. I don't know what you're talking about. They all sounded hollow and pathetic, even to me. The day dragged on, an eternity of agonizing suspense. I stayed in my room, pretending to be studying for finals that had already ended, my ears straining for any sign of impending doom. But nothing happened. The phone didn't ring. The doorbell remained silent. By late afternoon, a new kind of fear began to creep in. What if she wasn't going to confront me? What if she was just going to know what if? From now on, every time she saw me, her polite smile would be hiding a secret knowledge of my pathetic, shameful wish. The thought of that quiet judgment, that unspoken pity, was almost worse than an open confrontation. Around 5 o'clock, just as the winter sky was beginning to bleed into a deep, bruised purple, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps on our porch, followed by a soft knock on the front door. "This is it." I froze, my body rigid. I heard my mom open the door, her cheerful voice, and then a softer, older voice replying, "Mrs. Evans." They exchanged pleasantries for a moment, the words muffled and indistinct. Then I heard my mom call up the stairs. "Alex, Mrs. Evans dropped something off for you." My blood turned to ice water. Something for me. It was the letter. She was returning it, a final, cruel twist of the knife. I wanted to pretend I was asleep, to hide under the covers until she was gone. But my feet were already moving, carrying me out of my room and down the stairs against my will. My mom was standing in the hallway, holding a small, elegant, cream-colored envelope. She handed it to me with a curious smile. "Your secret admirer," she joked. I could barely manage a weak, shaky smile in return. My name, Alex, was written on the front in beautiful, looping cursive. I took the envelope, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb. It was thick, made of expensive cardstock. I could feel my mom's eyes on me, waiting for me to open it. "I'm just gonna open it in my room," I mumbled, already backing away. "All right, honey, dinner in an hour," she said, turning back toward the kitchen. I fled back to the safety of my room, closing the door and leaning against it, my heart pounding in my ears. The envelope felt heavy, like it contained the verdict of my entire life. With trembling hands, I broke the seal. Inside was not my letter, but a thick, folded card. On the front was a simple, elegant painting of a snow-covered pine bough. I opened it. The same beautiful cursive script filled the inside. Dear Alex, I believe the wind left something in my yard that belongs to you. I also believe that some things are not meant for prying eyes, so I have taken the liberty of destroying it. Please know it is safe. My breath caught in my throat. Destroying it. A wave of relief so intense it made my knees weak washed over me. It was gone. The evidence was gone. But there was more. Sometimes, the quietest wishes are the most important ones. I will be having some cinnamon tea and gingerbread tomorrow evening. The 23rd, around 7 o'clock. If you are free, I would be very glad for your company. My house is often too quiet this time of year. Warmly, Eleanor Evans. I read the words again, and then a third time. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a dismissal. It was an invitation. There was a kindness in her words, a gentle understanding that baffled me. The quietest wishes are the most important ones. She understood. Somehow, this woman I barely knew, this neighbor who was practically a stranger, understood more than anyone else in my life. I sat on the edge of my bed, the card in my hands, a war raging inside me. My fears screamed at me to ignore it, to pretend it never happened, to retreat back into the safety of my gray hoodie and my invisible life. It was a trap. She was going to lecture me, to try and fix me. But another voice, a smaller, more hopeful voice, whispered back, what if she isn't? What if this was the one and only time in my life someone had seen a glimpse of my true self and hadn't run away? What if she was offering acceptance? The hope was terrifying. It was a fragile, fluttering thing in the cage of my ribs, and it scared me more than the fear itself, because if I acknowledged that hope, if I let myself believe in it for even a second, the thought of losing it again was unbearable. But the alternative to ignore this one, tiny chance, to go on living as I was, suffocating in silence, suddenly seemed even more unbearable. For the first time, the possibility of something else, something better, had presented itself. I looked at the card again, an invitation for tea. It was so simple, so normal. Maybe, just maybe, I could be brave enough for that. The next evening, at precisely 7 o'clock, I stood on Mrs. Evans's doorstep, my heart performing a frantic drum solo against my ribs. It had taken every ounce of courage I possessed to walk the 20 feet from my front door to hers. I was wearing my usual uniform jeans and a dark, shapeless sweatshirt, but it felt less like a comfort and more like a costume I couldn't wait to shed. My hand hovered over the doorbell, shaking. I was about to either make the biggest mistake of my life or take the first real step toward it. Before I could lose my nerve, the door swung open. Mrs. Evans stood there, a warm smile on her face. She was a small woman with short, impeccably styled silver hair and kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me. She wore a simple black sweater and gray slacks, but she carried herself with an elegance that made the simple outfit look timeless. "Alex, I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice calm and gentle. "Please, come in out of the cold." I stepped inside, and the warmth of her house enveloped me immediately. It was more than just physical heat. It was a feeling. The air was filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon, ginger, and pine. A fire crackled merrily in the fireplace, casting a soft, flickering glow over the cozy living room. A beautifully decorated Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights twinkling like captured stars. It felt like walking into a hug. "Your house is beautiful," I managed to say, my voice sounding tight and strange to my own ears. "Thank you, dear. It gets lonely rattling around in it by myself. Tea is ready. Come, sit." She led me to a pair of comfortable armchairs by the fire. A tray was already set on the small table between them with a steaming teapot, 2 delicate porcelain cups, and a plate of gingerbread cookies shaped like stars. The whole scene was so disarmingly normal, so peaceful, that a little bit of the tension in my shoulders began to ease. She poured the tea, a fragrant dark amber liquid. She didn't press me, she didn't stare. She simply made small talk about the weather, about how beautiful the snow was, about a book she was reading. She treated me like any other guest, and with every passing minute, I felt myself relax a little more. The terrified boy who had knocked on her door was slowly being soothed by the simple, profound power of her kindness. Finally, after we had both finished a cookie, she set her teacup down and looked at me, her expression soft and serious. "I meant what I said in my card," she began, her voice low. "Your secret is safe with me. I was a doctor for 40 years, an endocrinologist. I have been entrusted with more secrets than you can possibly imagine. This one, it is not so unusual as you might think." An endocrinologist, a hormone doctor. The puzzle piece clicked into place, and my eyes widened. Of course, she would have seen people like me before. Patients. "What I read in your letter," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "It wasn't a silly wish. It sounded to me like a person who is in a great deal of pain, a person who is not being allowed to exist as they are." My throat tightened, and I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. To have someone articulate the chaos in my soul so simply, so accurately, it was overwhelming. She reached over and picked up a small, beautifully wrapped gift from the mantelpiece. It was thin, the size of a book. She held it out to me. "I believe this is also yours," she said softly. Confused, I took it. The wrapping paper was a deep velvety red, tied with a gold ribbon. My hand shook as I carefully untied the bow and peeled back the paper. It was a card, identical to the one she'd left for me yesterday. I opened it. Inside, written in that same elegant cursive, were just 2 words. "For Alexia." I stared at the name, my name, seeing it written there, so deliberately, so beautifully. It was like a key turning in a lock deep inside me that I didn't even know was there. A single, hot tear escaped and slid down my cheek. I choked back a sob, a sound that was half pain and half a relief so profound it was dizzying. When a new baby is born, the first gift we give them is a name, Mrs. Evans said, her voice a gentle murmur beside me. It is the first step in telling them who they are. It seems to me that a person is being born right here, in this room, and she deserves her name. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the quiet space between us. "If you're willing, from today, in this house, I will call you Alexia." The name, spoken aloud by someone else for the first time, landed in my soul. It didn't create an explosion of joy. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of a bone being set back into place, a feeling of rightness, the feeling of being put down in the correct spot after a lifetime of being misplaced. "Yes," I whispered, the word barely audible. "Please." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "All right, Alexia, then there is one more thing." She stood up. "I had a thought. You've been given your name. Would you like to try living as Alexia for a few hours just here? Just for us?" My heart leaped into my throat. Before I could process the offer, she disappeared into another room, returning a moment later with a few items of clothing draped over her arm. She laid them gently on the other armchair. On top was a dress. It was made of a soft, deep red wool with long sleeves and a simple, graceful cut. It wasn't flashy or revealing. It was elegant and understated beneath it. I could see a simple set of white cotton underwear briefs and a soft, simple bra. "My granddaughter left a few things here," she explained, her tone matter-of-fact, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "I think they might be about your size. The bathroom is just down the hall. Take all the time you need. No one will bother you." I stared at the clothes, my mind reeling. Fear and a desperate, exhilarating curiosity warred within me. This was it. This was the moment I had only ever allowed myself to dream about in the deepest, most secret corners of my mind. Nodding dumbly, I scooped up the clothes. The fabric was softer than anything I owned. I walked to the bathroom as if in a dream, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. I closed the door, locked it, and stood leaning against it, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Slowly, I stripped off my sweatshirt and jeans, the familiar, boyish clothes feeling alien and wrong. I folded them and set them aside. Then, I picked up the white cotton briefs. The fabric was light, smooth. I stepped into them, pulling them up over my hips. The sensation was indescribable. It was a different kind of pressure, a different shape. It felt impossibly strange, yet also profoundly correct. I clipped on the bra, the simple band a line of gentle pressure around my chest. It felt like a hug, a quiet anchor. Finally, I picked up the dress. I pulled the soft wool over my head, and it slid down over my body, the fabric draping in a way my own clothes never did. It didn't cling, but it followed the lines of my body, suggesting a shape I didn't know I had. I took a deep breath and turned to face the mirror. The person looking back was not a perfect girl. I didn't see a stranger. I saw me, my face, my eyes, my hair, but something was different. The harsh lines seemed softer. The lost look in my eyes was replaced by one of wide-eyed, terrified wonder. The dress didn't make me into someone else. It felt like it had revealed something that had been there all along, for the first time in my life. I looked at my reflection, and I didn't want to turn away. I saw a glimmer, a faint, flickering outline of Alexia, and she was beautiful. That first night as Alexia was a fragile beginning. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, Mrs. Evans didn't make a fuss. She simply smiled and said, "The red suits you, dear." And we sat by the fire, talking for hours. For the first time, I talked. I told her about the feeling of wrongness, the secret shame, the quiet yearning, and she listened. She truly listened when it was time to go. Changing back into Alex's clothes felt like putting on a lead suit. The rough denim and heavy sweatshirt were an abrasive, painful reminder of the life waiting for me on the other side of the fence. That night marked a change. Over the next few weeks, through the rest of the Christmas holiday and into the bleak quiet of January, Mrs. Evans's house became my sanctuary. 2 or 3 evenings a week, I would slip across the yard after my parents were settled in for the night, and for a few precious hours, I would be Alexia. Mrs. Evans, or Eleanor, as she insisted I call her when we were alone, became my gentle, unlikely tutor in the art of being. These weren't formal lessons. There were no lectures or drills. It was a process of quiet guidance, born of her decades of medical wisdom and her deep, innate compassion. Femininity isn't a performance. Alexia, she told me one evening as we sat in her kitchen, sipping chamomile tea, it's a way of being comfortable in your own skin. You don't need to force yourself into a different shape. You just need to learn to listen to the body you have. She started with the very foundations, the clothes. She brought out more things her granddaughter had left behind: simple sweaters, comfortable skirts, soft leggings, and she taught me about underwear. It was a conversation that would have been mortifying with anyone else, but with Eleanor, it felt clinical and kind. The first layer is the most important, she explained, holding up a simple lace-trimmed cotton bra. It's not for anyone else to see. It's for you. It's the first thing you put on. A reminder to yourself of who you are, even when the world sees something different. That first time I wore a bra and panties for more than just a few minutes, under my male clothes, was a revelation. I went with her on an errand to the grocery store, dressed as Alex, but with Alexia's secret layer underneath. At first, the sensation was all-consuming. I was hyper-aware of the straps on my shoulders, the feel of the elastic band of the briefs against my waist, the soft fabric against my skin. Every movement was a new and startling reminder. I was sure everyone could tell that it was somehow written all over my face. But as we walked through the aisles, the initial overwhelming awareness began to fade. The feeling didn't disappear, but it settled. It melted into the background of my physical senses, becoming less of a foreign object and more of a part of me, like a second skin. It was a quiet, constant source of affirmation, a secret hum of truth beneath the disguise of Alex. It was my armor. Eleanor also taught me about movement, not how to walk like a girl in some stereotypical hip-swaying way, but how to move in a way that felt natural with the new shapes my clothes created. When you wear a skirt, she said, demonstrating with a simple, flowing movement, you have to be mindful of how you sit, how you bend, not because it's improper, but because it's practical. It teaches you a different kind of physical awareness. Your center of gravity feels different. Just listen to the fabric. It will tell you what to do. So I practiced, in the safety of her living room. I learned to sit without feeling awkward, to walk without feeling like I was on a stage. It wasn't about imitation. It was about integration. It was about allowing my body to find a new rhythm, a new language of movement that felt authentic. With these physical changes came a profound psychological shift. In the privacy of my own mind, I began to think of myself as she, at first. It was a conscious effort, a gentle correction every time the old pronoun surfaced. He wants, no. She wants to listen to this song. He needs, no. I need to finish this assignment. But soon, it became effortless. The internal monologue of my life finally started to match the person I was becoming. This new internal reality made the external one increasingly painful. The sound of my old name, Alex, started to feel more and more like a physical blow. The reflection of the boy in the mirror was no longer just a disconnected stranger. He was a painful reminder of my confinement. A deep, aching sadness would wash over me whenever I had to leave Eleanor's house, carefully folding Alexia's clothes away, packing her back into a bag until the next visit. Putting on my boy clothes felt like a betrayal. One night, as I was getting ready to leave, I looked at my reflection in her hallway mirror. I was wearing Alex's jeans and hoodie, my disguise back in place, but my face looked different. The hours spent as Alexia had left a trace, a moffness in my expression, a light in my eyes that wasn't there before. A terrifying thought pierced through me, sharp and clear. If I get used to this feeling, if I get truly used to feeling like myself, will I be able to go back? Will I be able to survive as Alex ever again? The question hung in the air, unanswered, and I knew, with a certainty that was both liberating and petrifying, that the answer was no. There was no going back. Alexia was no longer just a name in a letter or a secret identity for a few hours a week. She was me, and she was finally, insistently, demanding to live. The winter nights in Eleanor's living room were a necessary cocoon, a safe space for Alexia to slowly, tentatively, take form. But a butterfly cannot stay in its chrysalis forever. The real test, the one that terrified me down to my bones, was the world outside that warm, protected space. Eleanor seemed to understand this innately. One evening in early spring, as the last of the snow was finally melting and the days were growing longer, she made a casual suggestion. "I have a craving for the almond croissants from the Gilded Spoon," she said, her tone light, "and I find myself too tired to drive. I was wondering if my dear friend Alexia might be willing to walk down there with me." My blood ran cold. The Gilded Spoon was a small, popular bakery in our town's main square. A 10-minute walk away, it would be evening, but it would still be light out. There would be people who might look, people who might see. I don't know, I stammered, my heart starting to pound. "I don't think I'm ready." "Nonsense," she said gently, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. "We are not going on a grand adventure. We are two women going to buy a pastry. There is nothing more ordinary in the world." She helped me choose an outfit, something she called beautifully unremarkable. We settled on a pair of dark, well-fitting women's jeans a world away from my baggy boy jeans, a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater that was soft as a cloud, and a long navy blue trench coat. The final touch was a silk scarf with a pattern of soft blue flowers, which she expertly tied around my neck. Then, she sat me down in front of her vanity mirror. "Just a little something to help you feel put together," she said. It wasn't a full face of makeup. It was subtle, an artful touch of concealer under my eyes to hide the nervous shadows, a swipe of mascara that made my eyes look wider and more awake, and a tinted lip balm that brought a hint of natural color to my lips. When she was done, I stared at my reflection. It was still me, but it was a polished version. It was Alexia, looking less like a girl playing dress-up and more like a young woman who was simply herself. The walk to the bakery was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Every footstep on the pavement felt like a drumbeat of anxiety. I was convinced that every passing car was slowing down to stare, that every person on the street was looking at me, dissecting me, seeing through my fragile disguise. I kept my head down, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of the trench coat, my shoulders hunched. Eleanor walked beside me, her pace unhurried, chatting calmly about the new flowers blooming in her garden. She was my anchor in a sea of panic. When she sensed my terror, she gently bumped her shoulder against mine. Lift your chin. Dear, she murmured, you belong here just as much as anyone else. Walk as if you do. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to lift my head. The evening air was cool and fresh. The world didn't stop and point. Life was simply going on around us. Inside the bakery, the warm, sugary air was thick and inviting. The place was bustling with a quiet evening crowd. A knot of terror tightened in my stomach. We stood in line, and I focused all my energy on appearing calm, my eyes fixed on the glass case of pastries. "Oh, that looks lovely," the woman behind us in line said. I stiffened, sure she was talking about me, a prelude to a cruel joke. I braced myself for impact. "Your scarf," the woman clarified, smiling at me. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind face. "The color is beautiful on you." I was so stunned I could barely function. Oh, I managed to squeak out the thank you. Eleanor ordered our croissants, and as I stepped aside to wait, a young man who was heading for the door paused and held it open for me, even though I was still several feet away. He caught my eye for a brief second and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and a hint of a smile before heading out. It was nothing. It was everything. It wasn't a catcall. It wasn't a leering stare or a vulgar come on. It was a simple, common courtesy, a fleeting moment of social grace. But it was a courtesy extended to me, to Alexia. He had seen a woman and held the door for her. In that tiny, insignificant gesture, he had validated my existence. He saw me as I was. On the walk home, the fear was gone. In its place was a dizzying, terrifying exhilaration. My heart was still pounding, but it wasn't from fear or shame anymore. It was the thrilling pulse of being seen, truly seen, and accepted as part of the tapestry of the world. That night, I began to understand. This journey wasn't just about the clothes I wore or the name I used. It was about my place in society. Being Alex was about being invisible, blending in, never drawing attention. Being Alexia was about being visible, about interacting with the world in a completely new way. It was about being perceived as female, with all the subtle social cues and interactions that entailed. The cashier's compliment, the man holding the door, these weren't just random events. They were a reflection of my new social position. And while it was terrifying, while it exposed me to a vulnerability I had never known, I realized with a sudden shocking clarity that I didn't want to go back to being invisible. For the first time, I had been seen correctly, and it felt more real and more right than anything I had ever experienced. I didn't just want to hide in Eleanor's living room anymore. I wanted to live in the world, as Alexia. The evening trip to the bakery was a watershed moment. It cracked open the door to a world I desperately wanted to join, but it also illuminated how unprepared I was to navigate it alone. The quiet safety of Eleanor's home had been my incubator, but I knew I needed more than soft sweaters and gentle encouragement to truly live. A week later, Eleanor broached the subject I had been too afraid to consider. "Alexia," she said, her tone gentle but serious, "what we have done here is the first step. It is a social and emotional one. But if this is who you truly are, there are other steps, medical steps, and they must be taken with professional guidance." She explained that, through her old network of colleagues, she knew of a clinic in the city, one that specialized in gender-affirming care. It had therapists, doctors, and a support system. "You don't have to do this alone," she assured me. "And you shouldn't. You need a team." The idea of it was petrifying. It made everything feel so real, official. Writing a letter to Santa was a fantasy. Wearing a dress in a neighbor's house was a secret game. But going to a clinic, talking to doctors, that was a commitment. That was stepping off a cliff, trusting there would be ground beneath my feet. My first therapy session was with a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. She had a calm presence and warm, perceptive eyes that reminded me of Eleanor's. I sat stiffly on the comfortable couch in her office, terrified, expecting to have to defend myself, to prove my identity. Instead, she just asked me to tell my story. And so, for the first time, I told everything, not just the highlights I'd shared with Eleanor, but the deep, messy, confusing history, the childhood unease, the teenage shame, the years of feeling like a ghost in my own life. I talked until my throat was raw, and she just listened, nodding occasionally. her expression one of deep, validating empathy. "It sounds like you have been carrying a very heavy weight for a very long time," she said when I was finally done. Hearing my own tangled, chaotic feelings summarized so simply and without judgment felt like a physical release. Over the next few months, those sessions became my lifeline. Dr. Sharma gave me the language to understand myself. She explained gender dysphoria not as a mental illness, but as a recognized medical condition, a fundamental incongruence between one's assigned sex and one's innate gender identity. She didn't promise me an easy path or a magical transformation. She talked about the realities, the challenges, the social and emotional hurdles. She gave me tools to cope with my anxiety and strategies for navigating the world. It was in her office that Alexia stopped being a secret wish and became a solid, tangible identity. After several months of therapy, Dr. Sharma agreed that I was ready for the next step. She referred me to an endocrinologist at the clinic, a colleague of Eleanor's. It turned out Dr. Jacobs was kind, methodical, and incredibly thorough. He explained the effects of estrogen on the body with scientific precision. He didn't sugarcoat it. He laid out the timeline, how it was a slow, gradual process, a second puberty that would unfold over years, not weeks. He talked about what hormones could do: soften skin, redistribute body fat, halt male pattern baldness, promote breast development, and he talked about what they couldn't do: change my bone structure or alter my voice. He carefully explained all the risks and required extensive blood work to ensure I was a healthy candidate. There were no false promises, no magical thinking. It was science, clear and direct. And then, one sunny afternoon in late summer, after all the evaluations and tests were complete, I found myself sitting in his office as he handed me a prescription. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely take it from him. That evening, I sat on my bed, the little white paper bag from the pharmacy beside me. Inside was a small bottle of blue pills. Estrogen. It seemed so anticlimactic. This profound, life-altering substance was contained in a tiny, ordinary pill. I held one in the palm of my hand. It wasn't a magic bean. I knew that taking it wouldn't instantly turn me into the woman I dreamed of being. But as I looked at it, I had a moment of profound clarity. The real transformation hadn't started with this pill. It had started months ago, with a letter, with a kind neighbor, with a whispered name. My femininity, my identity as Alexia wasn't something that would come from this hormone. It was already inside me. This pill wasn't a creator. It was a key. It was the tool that would finally begin to align my body with the person I already was. This wasn't a magic wand, it was a promise, a long, slow, and unwavering commitment to myself. It was permission, finally, to stop betraying myself every single day. With a deep, steadying breath, I placed the pill on my tongue and swallowed it with a glass of water. Nothing happened. The world didn't change. But I had, in that quiet, simple act, I had chosen my future. I had chosen me. The small blue pills became a quiet, daily ritual, a secret covenant I kept with myself. For the first few months, the changes were imperceptible to anyone else, but I could feel them, a subtle softening of my skin, a slight shift in my emotional landscape. It was like feeling the tide turn long before anyone on the shore can see the water moving. But with this internal shift came an increasingly urgent need for external honesty. I was living a double life, and the strain was becoming unbearable. I was Alexia in my soul, but I was still Alex at the breakfast table. The lie was choking me. I knew I had to tell my parents. The thought filled me with a terror so profound it made my stomach ache. These were the people who had raised me, who loved me unconditionally, or so I hoped. But they loved Alex. I was about to tell them that the son they knew was, in a way, gone. I confessed my fear to Eleanor. She didn't try to downplay it. "It will be difficult," she said, her expression full of empathy. "Their world is about to be turned upside down. They will be scared. They will be confused. And they will probably say things they don't mean. But you must do it." Then she made an offer that left me speechless with gratitude. "If you'd like, I will come with you, not to speak for you, but to be there, sometimes. Having a calm voice that isn't caught in the emotional storm can help. I can answer their questions from a medical perspective, if they have them." Having her there felt like having a safety net. We planned it for a Sunday afternoon. I felt sick all day, unable to eat. When Eleanor arrived, her calm, steady presence was the only thing keeping me from bolting out the back door. We sat down with my parents in the living room, the same room where we'd opened Christmas presents and watched countless movies. It felt alien now, like a stage set for a terrible play. My mom had a plate of cookies on the coffee table. My dad was asking Eleanor about her garden. The normality of it was agonizing. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I took a deep, shaky breath. Mom, Dad, I have something I need to tell you. It's really important. They turned to me, their smiles fading as they saw the look on my face. The silence in the room was suddenly heavy, suffocating. I'm transgender, I said. The words came out in a rush, quiet but clear. I'm a woman. My name is Alexia. For a long moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. My dad stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion and shock. What my dad finally managed, his voice raspy, "What are you talking about? Alex, is this a joke?" "It's not a joke," I said, my own voice trembling but firm. "This is who I am. I've felt this way my entire life." "A woman," my mom whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But you're our son. We don't understand. Did we do something wrong?" And then the questions came, a torrent of fear and confusion. Was I sick? Was this a phase? Was I being influenced by someone? Was it because I didn't have enough friends? Their fear was a tangible thing in the room, wrapping around me, trying to pull me back into the familiar, safe box of being their son. This was where Eleanor stepped in. "Mark, Sharon," she said, her voice calm and compassionate, cutting through the rising panic. "I know this is a tremendous shock, but this is not a choice, and it is not your fault. Gender identity is a deeply ingrained part of a person. Like being left-handed, Alexia isn't sick. She's finally allowing herself to be who she has always been." She explained, in simple scientific terms, what gender dysphoria was. She spoke not as an emotional neighbor, but as a retired physician. She provided a framework of logic and medicine that gave their fear a place to land, something to hold on to besides their own confusion. They still struggled. They stumbled over the name, the pronouns. My dad got angry, his voice rising. "I don't get it. You've been Alex for 19 years. "No," I said, and the strength in my own voice surprised me. "I've been called Alex for 19 years, but I've always been Alexia." For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for my own existence. I was scared. I was heartbroken to see them in so much pain, but I wasn't ashamed. I was stating a fact. This was me. The conversation didn't end with a happy, tearful group hug. It ended with exhaustion, with raw emotions, with my mom crying softly and my dad sitting in stony, bewildered silence. There was no resolution, but I had done it. The secret was out. I had stood in front of the two most important people in my life, and I had told them the truth. As Eleanor and I walked back to our house in the fading afternoon light, I felt drained, but also light. The heaviest burden I had ever carried, the crushing weight of my secret, was finally gone. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with difficulty, but for the first time, it was an honest path, and I would be walking it as myself. The year that followed was a landscape of gradual, painstaking change. It was a year of awkward conversations, of therapy sessions for my parents as well as for me, of them trying, failing, and trying again with my name and pronouns. It was a year of small victories. The first time my mom called me Alexia without correcting herself. The first time my dad used she in passing. It was also a year of profound personal transformation. Living full-time as Alexia was like learning to breathe after a lifetime of holding my breath. The hormones worked their slow, subtle magic. My skin grew softer, my face lost some of its angularity, and my body began to take on gentle, feminine curves. My hair grew past my shoulders, and I learned to style it in a way that made me feel pretty. The changes weren't dramatic, but when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw a stranger. I saw me, Alexia. Her image was no longer a faint, flickering outline. It was solidifying. coming into focus with each passing day. Now it was Christmas Eve again. Exactly 1 year since I had stood on Eleanor's doorstep, a terrified boy clutching a desperate hope. I was standing there again tonight, but everything was different. I was wearing a simple, elegant, dark green velvet dress, black tights, and low-heeled ankle boots. The outfit felt completely natural, an extension of myself rather than a costume. The soft cotton bra and panties I wore underneath were no longer a shocking novelty or a secret armor. They were just my underwear, the mundane, comfortable foundation of my day. Eleanor opened the door, her face breaking into a wide, radiant smile. "Alexia, you look wonderful, my dear. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," I said, stepping inside and wrapping her in a warm hug. Her home was just as I remembered: the smell of pine and cinnamon, the crackling fire, the twinkling lights on the tree, but it no longer felt like a sanctuary from a hostile world. It felt like home. We sat by the fire, just as we had a year ago. She handed me a cup of tea, her eyes sparkling. "A lot can change in a year, can't it?" she said softly. I don't even have the words to thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life." "Eleanor." "Nonsense," she said, waving a dismissive hand, though her eyes were misty. "You saved your own life. You were brave enough to write the letter. You were brave enough to come here. You were brave enough to become yourself. I just held the door open." Later, my parents came over. It was still a little awkward. They were still learning, but they were there. They brought gifts, and on the tag of mine, in my mother's familiar handwriting, it said to our daughter, Alexia. Seeing it made my heart ache with a beautiful, painful, overwhelming gratitude. We sat together, the four of us, and made quiet conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was a start. After they left, Eleanor and I sat in the comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. My mind drifted back to the boy I had been, hunched over his desk, pouring his secret heart out onto a piece of paper in a desperate, hopeless plea. He felt like a different person, someone I knew a long, long time ago. He hadn't dared to ask for a new life. He had only asked for a name. He had no idea that the name was the key to everything. I looked over at Eleanor, this woman who had become my confidant, my guide, my second grandmother. She had found a wish in the snow and, instead of discarding it, had nurtured it into a life, my life. A profound realization settled deep in my soul, a truth so clear and bright it felt like the star on top of the tree. I didn't just get a name. I thought, the words a silent prayer of thanks to the universe, to the wind, to the kind woman beside me. I got the right to grow up as myself.